んの心の中には2つの部屋がある。この部屋はおもちゃが散らばっているが純真だ。邪念がない。そしてもう一つの部屋。
A mysterious game that eludes the fans of Yu-Gi-Oh, but somehow makes people who play this game question why it even exists. This game is easily the most forgettable Yu-Gi-Oh game, which sounds insane to say because it sold well enough to be considered a platinum hit on the Xbox. At the start of the year, Konami announced 3 games to be coming to the States: Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championship 2004, an expansion for the Power of Chaos, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Xbox. They couldn't even be bothered to give this game a real name. Now, it's normal for games and consoles to go under code names before their release. However, I don't think it's normal for a game to not have an official name known to the public till near release date. Even scans of the game in Shonen Jump supposedly didn't have a name. What a way to build up hype with blurry screenshots and a shrug. Mind you, the issue it was mentioned in came out in March of 2004. The same month the game was releasing.
I'm a genius.
Something else that may seem odd is the fact that it's on the Halo merchant as an exclusive. Besides thinking about how funny it is to play a Yu-Gi-Oh game with a controller that was made in mind for Shrek, a lot of Japanese devs at the time tend to stay away from the idea of making exclusives for that console at the time.
Exuboxu no Sarah Des.
That's not to say that Japanese devs didn't see success on the console from time to time. Tecmo saw a lot of success on the console with games like Dead or Alive amongst other titles. However, companies like Atlus have gone on record to say that they lost money making a game exclusive to the Xbox. Hell, they often didn't get much money back for making certain titles multi-platform. And that was the case for a good chunk of the devs because there wasn't much of an install base for their IPs on that console. Take Konami's other game on the Xbox, Metal Gear Solid 2 Substance, which was a port of the game with extra content that was a time exclusive. This game sold well on the Xbox, going over the $500,000 mark, but when you consider the fact that Metal Gear Solid 2 on the PS2 sold 7 million copies, you can see why they didn't feel the need to put the third game on the Xbox amongst other reasons. Even if Microsoft was handing them money for exclusivity, they still had to consider if the bag is even worth it. Like, what's the amount of people realistically buying the game on that console, especially in Japan? The bag from Microsoft to make a Yu-Gi-Oh game for them might have been nice, but I can't help but think that this game would have seen more success being multi-platform, more specifically the PS2. Charles Murakami, the senior producer at Konami, states that the reason their games were launching across multiple platforms was to provide to fans of the series an option to play the game on their console of choice, which sounds good for PR talk of any other game, but this is from an interview specifically about Yu-Gi-Oh, and that's not what happened in reality. This would make more sense if Konami made the console games multi-platform rather than exclusives. Maybe you can chalk it up to inexperience, but they clearly had the ability to do that with other flagship titles being multi-platform, so why not Yu-Gi-Oh? Something else that was interesting to me was what he said further on in the interview. Handheld devices were a natural fit to simulate the physical card game. Home console titles had unique Yu-Gi-Oh games based around the monsters, characters, and themes from the anime instead. He reminds the interviewer that the franchise's audience has different fan subgroups, and digital games had to try and cater to them. Some people love the anime and the characters, some are more focused on the card game, and some like the designs of iconic monsters, etc. Yu-Gi-Oh! Worldwide Edition was authentic to the card game, while Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D's Wheelie Breakers put the player in the D-wheel to mimic the show. Why is this interview relevant? Well, a couple of things. He mentioned Wheelie Breakers, which is a game heavily requested on my channel, and
I can do this and...
Ain't nobody trying to hear that bullshit, man.
The other thing is that it explains why all the console Yu-Gi-Oh games do not play like the TCG. The way you use the cards in Duelist of the Roses can turn individual cards into leaders that gain abilities. Your units in Capsule Coliseum grow the more you use them and take them to battle, along with gaining a bonus in their abilities if they share Yugi's element. Monsters in Falsebound Kingdom grow more powerful the closer they are to their commander. The console games in the 6th gen focus more on the themes from the show and the idea that there is a bond between you and the monsters in that deck of cards. And Konami was very consistent with this design philosophy for the 6th gen games, except one. No, it's not the Tag Force game on the PS2. That was a port that came out a year plus after the original release of Tag Force on the PSP, which held the design philosophy of making the handheld games closer to the physical card game. And for some of the original Duel Monster games and their sequels, they were made at a time before the rules were set in stone. For the ones that were made after, like Sacred Cards and Reshef, even though they don't play like the physical TCG, they are a lot closer to the rules of the TCG than any of the console games up to that point. I would say the idea to go down the route of the console games being so much more different from the TCG probably came after Forbidden Memories. What I'm talking about is Dawn of Destiny. The game just didn't get the memo for some reason. Now, there is nothing wrong with the game not being innovative and unique like the other ones. In fact, most Yu-Gi-Oh fans wanted the console games to be closer to the physical card game than the weirdness that we got. But the more I played this game, the more I realized, could we really get a quality game like that from Konami at the time? What's the point of having a game that plays like the physical TCG a month after World Championship 2004 came out? A game that plays like the physical trading card game. It's not like the card pool was going to be any different, right? The only way this game can be worth playing is by being a better game than 2004 and makes up for all or some of the things 2004 ended up lacking. If you see my video on that game, you know the bar is in hell because it absolutely sucks. However, I think this game is not much better. So in this video, not only will I be talking about my thoughts and experiences with this game, but I also want to dive into the development and production info I found online and piece together theories that made me think that this game was rushed out in order to use the money from Microsoft on other ventures. This is my experience with Yu-Gi-Oh! The Dawn of Destiny.
ここだったのか。たどり着いたのか、本当の部屋に。いつギロだ。長いモンスターと山のここ根の人の。この部屋はおもちゃが散らばっているが純真だ。
The first thing right out the gate is the most important screen in the game. More important than you trying to remember your social security number. The name creation. And I'm not joking, this screen is very important. See, certain games in this series will let you choose a starter deck. Other games will give you a lump of coal seemingly at random. But it's never really that random. Some of the games tend to have mechanisms in the background that predetermine what you get depending on several things. For this game, it's the name creation. I guess an astrologer designed the algorithm or something. Your name determines which of the stages of grief you get. Pain, bargaining, and depression. I know it sounds like I say this all the time, but these are genuinely the worst starter decks of all time. Even though these games always give you the middle stages of grief, the next stage always comes after. Reconstruction. The name Gameboylad gives the Trihorn deck. My channel mascot is Jazz, and this gives me the Zera deck. Adding another D to my name like my Twitch channel gives me the Cosmo deck. I wanted to pick the Cosmo deck so bad because it has Jurai Gumo and Gemini Elf. Really good beat stick cards that held it down for me in most of the games that I played so far. But you gotta take the ugly ducklings too, and they all have 1,000 attack points or less. For clarity, 18 to 1900 is what you typically want from low level cards. 15 to 1700 is decent for the video games mostly, and anything less is no good unless it has a good effect.
Trash!
Even though the Cosmo deck comes with 2 low level cards that have 1900 and more, the army of 1k vanilla monsters are worthless and only serve to be fuel for campfires. The Trihorn deck attack power averages around 11 to 1300 with its best low level cards having 1700. It comes with Cyber Alligator, which is probably one of the better high level cards in the game. Not as terrible as the Cosmo deck, but it is an average. The Zera deck probably is just a better version of the Trihorn deck. Even though its high level card is a bit weaker, the cards in this deck just have a better attack average overall. These 3 choices is like someone asking you what you want to write an essay with: a highlighter, a broken pencil, or a pen with no ink. It's a tough toss-up between the Cosmo and Zera decks, but because of how this game operates, it's best to pick the Zera deck. The Jurai Gumo in the other deck relies on you taking risk with your life points, and while I personally don't care for that drawback in other games, you'll later see why in this game your life points matter a lot more now than ever. In the main menu, you're presented with single duels and triple duels. No, not 3-on-3 tag duels. That's way too good for a lame ass game like this. Triple duel is the main way to progress the game. Not you again, Simon McMoron. He's usually the stand-in for Grandpa in various games in the same way movies in the 80s would use Van Damme instead of Arnold. So to see him next to Grandpa is trippy to say the least. Triple Duel has stages, and each stage has 3 opponents to face. You must beat all 3 in a row to unlock the next stage. Your life points in one duel carries over onto the next, sort of like a survival mode in a fighting game. Now thankfully, they don't have 8,000 life points because I think players would have died from old age before finishing the game if that was the case. The first stage, they have 7,000 life points in total versus your 6,000. Oh my god, why does the computer take its sweet ass time to go first or second? It just slowly swaps between 2 options 2 to 3 times. This game has the decision making speed of a dial-up modem. Okay, now that we're here, the rules of Yu-Gi-Oh goes, excuse me, is that a Mystic Tomato? Slate Warrior, what the?
Come on now.
You build a deck of 40 to 60 cards and you start the game by drawing 5 cards with a 6th at the start of your turn. You can normal summon a low level card in attack mode or set in defense mode once per turn. A low level monster card is anything with an orange or yellow border that has 4 stars or lower. High level monsters are cards with 5 stars or higher. To summon these, you must sacrifice a monster card that you have on the field depending on the card's level. Level 5 to 6 needs 1 monster as a tribute, level 7 and up needs 2. Monster cards with the yellow border are normal monsters, aka vanilla cards. Monster cards with the orange border are effect monsters that have special abilities that you can activate depending on the circumstances. Cards with the green border are magic cards. You can activate as many as you want during your turn. Cards with the pinkish purple like borders are trap cards. You must set them first and wait till your opponent's turn to activate them. From there, you can activate them at almost any time you want. To win a game, you gotta bring their life points down to 0. This can be done by doing battle against cards weaker than yours and inflicting damage to their life points equal to the difference in the card's attack if the card was in attack mode. If the card you attack is in defense mode, they lose no life for that. You can deal damage to their life points by attacking directly, which can only be done if they control no monsters. These are the basic rules and there are a ton more, but I'll mention them only if they come up, because in a lot of cases, they don't. If you notice, I freaked out at the sight of a few cards earlier. So normally, you and most opponents in the beginning of the game start off with weak cards. For example, in most other games, you'll typically have 15 to 1600 attackers. Slowly as the game progresses, you get cards that can boost those cards along with gaining cards that have 1700 attack. Then you use the cards in tandem later in the game to beat out the 18 and 1900 attackers they start to have, and you start to earn their cards as well. My strongest low level monster is 1700. Why does the first opponent have the best beaters in the game and effect monsters that have the same amount of value, if not more than the beaters he summoned? Well, in other games, different opponents' decks will get stronger the more you progress, like in Forbidden Memories and Reshuffle Destruction. In this game, I don't think they had the development time to give these characters decks that get stronger the more you progress. A lot of these opponents you will fight multiple times in different stages, but they will always use the same one deck they have. So they figured to just give them in-game decks, with the caveat being that they have less life points than usual. If I was to be extremely charitable, I don't think it's that bad. It's possible to have a scenario where they draw a bad hand and you just whip them in 2 turns. It's only 2,000 life points this time. I will say it is a bit fun at times to try and think of ways to survive just long enough against these opponents to just scratch them and move on as fast as possible. Certain mechanics in Yu-Gi-Oh that have no relevance in the grand scheme of the game start to matter a bit more now in this game. For example, people tend to forget the fact that you lose life points if the attack of your attacking card is weaker than their defense. It rarely comes up ever in the majority of Yu-Gi-Oh's competitive history, and I wouldn't be surprised by active players forgetting about the rule. However, in this game, walls are heavily valued because of that. You both can start to bleed from attacking set cards. Now, this duel alone showed me multiple issues with this game in just 3 turns. On one note, the AI is dumb.
It's so dumb.
Even though his Slate Warrior and Tomato are much stronger than my set card, he doesn't attack at all. Now, maybe you can chalk that up to playing it safe. Like I mentioned earlier, they have a little amount of life, so punching a wall will make them bleed. I do have a face down card too, I guess. Maybe the AI thinks it's a good trap card, but the next turn is when the AI shows its whole ass to me because it turns Slate Warrior to defense position. You have to understand that Slate Warrior has 400 defense points. Legit, if this card is in defense mode, 90% of cards in the game can dust it. I don't know if the AI is just gaslighting itself into thinking I have a mirror force or something at this point, but later this happens on multiple occasions. This also felt familiar to another game, but I wanted to reserve my suspicions at this point. Whatever, just summon a card, take advantage of the situation, and did you catch that? See, Slate Warrior has an effect to decrease the attack points of a card that beats it in battle by 500. So why didn't the game announce that? Most other games that have cards with effects like this will show you the activation of the effect to let you know that this happened just to be transparent, but not this game. At first I thought the effect didn't happen, but my card did lose attack points. So you're just not going to tell me that this happened?
What kind of shit is that?
Joker magic trick ass effect. It's so insane to me that no matter the game, I just find something new to be baffled by. These games are consistently bad and not even for the same reasons. It's not even an issue for people that sail the 7 seas, cause other effects will announce their activation. Like the game is not just gonna summon a card out of the deck just because you killed Mystic Tomato without saying it. It will announce the fact that it's summoning another card upon its destruction. It's just the sneaky effects. Later in the same duel, the AI shows how trigger happy it is to activate trap cards as soon as it possibly can, even at their own detriment. I literally have a face-up perma-trap card that stays face-up on the field after activation, and it has the effect to negate other trap cards. But for some reason, they persist to fire off every single trap card they have, knowing it won't work. In one duel, I was able to see how much of a mess this game is. A few other things to note about the duel is the UI. It's clean all things considered, but I can't help but think that they wasted so much space. The phase in the corner bumping into each other is a pretty neat look, and the game flashes the changing phases on the screen, but there isn't a sound effect to go with it, which feels a bit off considering every other game tends to have a sound effect for the phase change. Nothing crazy, but a simple would suffice. The background is inside the Millennium Puzzle that loops left and right. All the YouTube hacks can probably make several hour-long liminal space essays out of this background right here. In duels, when a field card is activated, which is a magic card that stays face up on the field after activation, the background will change depending on the card played. Now, most field spells look how you expect, but I don't know how they interpret luminous sparks like this. I thought the idea of the card is that the light is so bright you can't see in it. How did they end up thinking that the Fiend is emitting the light? They got the nigga flying in the background like an Archeops.
I'm the biggest bird.
Overall, I think the look is dope and it makes it easy to see what field card is in play just from a brief glance. Can't say the same for the board though. The board itself looks good, but it feels scrunched up. To me, it's because the name plaques take up so much space for no real reason. I don't think the name tag has to be there at all, especially since you don't have an avatar in this game. This is the best I can come up with when it comes to using as much of the screen as possible. I'm sure someone could think of something better, and in the future games, they don't really have this issue. All the monsters have models in the game just like Duelist of the Roses, but they don't do anything. They just stand idle and RPG Maker effects flash on the screen during battles. This is such a missed opportunity to give this game some flair. Why not have the card do a quick slash motion to go along with the effects like Pokemon games do? You're already wasting time showing off your skills in Blender for a few seconds, might as well go all out. Can't skip any of this either, so it just strikes me as odd and rushed. In between duels, you have a chance to swap cards in and out the side deck. The side deck is a pile of 15 cards you can swap in and out with the main deck between duels. I think with the context of how this game operates, this might be the only time the side deck is useful in a single player game. Normally the side deck is useless because the games don't really push you to consider having one. However, in this game with the survival mode like campaign, the side deck can possibly be useful for swapping in cards that recover life points. It's very clear that was the intent because they place a Muyon Curry in your side deck, which is a card that recovers a crumb of life points. They also put a Hungry Burger in the side deck along with the curry for the big bag niggas.
Crisco bathing.
Grandpa is next up, and looking back, it's probably best to fight the Boomer first. He's not much of a threat if you have a card over 1400 attack. However, it will take a while to reach the finish line because of the minefield of trap cards. Multiple copies of Trap Hole that destroys a monster when it's summoned, negate attacks which negates attacks in case you didn't hear the name, torrential tributes which destroy all monsters on the field when something is summoned, and a mirror force on top which can destroy all your face-up attack position monsters. Something that gets really annoying in the early to mid game is the opponent's access to some of the best magic and trap cards in the game. A lot more duels tend to drag out more because of all the trap cards keeping you in a never-ending loop of frustration. Yugi is the last opponent for me and should be for everyone else for reasons I'll lay out later. His deck is a mix between his anime deck and the starter deck in real life. He has multiple copies of Soldier of Stone and Mystical Elf, both cards having 2000 defense that I know you're not scaling over. At this point in the game, you just kinda have to hope for the AI to fuck up and put them in attack mode at the start. If not, they just stay on the field till he could tribute them for high level cards like the Summoned Skull and Curse of Dragon. Aside from the numerous good magic and traps he has, it doesn't help that he can stall with Swords of Revealing Light, which prevents you from attacking for 3 turns. I got lucky with my duel because I happen to have a Man-Eater bug. It has a flip effect that activates when flip face up. When that happens, you can destroy 1 monster on the field. He may be old, but that bitch still barks. Because of that card, I was easily able to just finish him off in the next few turns since he only has 3000 life points. Side note, if you flip up your effect cards, do not mash through the prompts. The target will be the card itself by default, so if you're mashing on the QTE, you'll end up using the effect on your own card. Learn from my mistakes so you can make new ones. Yu-Gi-Oh games have a strange relationship with prizing, just like Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments in real life.
$7? Are you fucking serious?
Either it's a game that rewards you with a pack that contains a few cards for your troubles, or it drip feeds you cards until you have a bachelor's in time being wasted. In this game, once you beat all 3 people in the stage, you're presented 3 statues of the god cards. By picking one of them, you're rewarded with 5 cards, which is not so bad.
Oh my goodness!
This game is very close to Forbidden Memories when it comes to having the worst rewards possible for winning duels. At least in Forbidden Memories, you can fuse the shitty cards like Honolulu and any female card to make Mystical Sand.
She kinda bad though.
In this game, your deck is not going to grow with this crap. Mind you, it took me 20 minutes in total to beat stage 1 with the deck I have. So is it like this for the rest of the game? Kinda, but not really. See, depending on the character you beat, the god associated with them usually has the better cards. So, say you beat Yugi. It's best to select the executive producer statue to get some good cards, since he owns Slifer in the story. Beat any of his friends, and Slifer is still the better pick because of their association to Yugi. Beat Merrick or anyone associated with him, and Ra has the better cards. Kaiba and anyone close to him is Obelisk. If the association is unknown like Rex or Mako, it's usually Obelisk. That alone is not enough, cause even if you pick the right god, you're still going to get shitty cards regardless. The other thing you must do for anything good to pop up is to defeat the Duelist 20 times. This game loves to waste your time like a certain other game that came out in the same year. Let's say you want a good high level monster from Yugi. First off, you gotta beat him as the last opponent in a stage. Then he's unlocked in the single mode. This is where you get the grind cards and play against the AI in duels that have an 8,000 life point total like normally. Before the 20 wins, there is a chance to get one of the good cards, but it's extremely small. The only rare cards I got before the 20 was the Magnet Warriors. After the 20 duels, the good cards in our decks will start to drip out with each win. However, you only get 3 cards in single mode instead of 5. And certain cards are locked behind triple duel. I'm not sure if you must beat the triple duel version 20 times to get good cards, but either way, this still fucking sucks. At this point in the game, the duels in the single mode will take 10 to 15 minutes. You need to spend upwards to 2 hours if you're trying to grind for something decent at the start of the game. Why do I feel like I'm getting deja vu from this? Now, you don't have to spend that much time if you know what you're doing. But just like I mentioned in Reshuffle Destruction, it's not like you're going to know that off rip. None of the info I told you so far is told within this game. I didn't even know this stuff myself until I wrote the script. At best, I just had a hunch that the God Card Association was a thing. The average player at this point is met with 2 options. Mash your head against the stages till you can't no more, or grind. Now, there is a right way to grind in this game, but I didn't find out about this until afterwards, and it might be a bit overkill. I also like to play these games as blind as possible. What I did worked out for me for my playthrough, but I can't help but feel like I got lucky with my route, so take it with a grain of salt. First, I wanted some walls, and only 2 duelists at the beginning of the game have them. Yugi is good for giving out Mystical Elf and Giant Soldier of Stone, both having 2000 defense, and with the Giant, I can boost it with Wastelands to make it a decent attacker. Yugi also drops an abundance of 14 to 1500 attack power cards. It took about 12 duels to get enough cards to feel comfortable. The other opponent to get cards from was the dueling computer. Initially, I only dueled it to see if it drops anything decent, and I stumbled across getting 2 Millennium Shields at once from the Raw statue. I also got some torrential tributes from I think either Grandpa or the CPU, but I can't remember which. None of this went smooth, by the way. First off, whenever Yugi played a wall himself, I had to reset.
It's the same old fucking shit!
I have no way to scale over a 2000 defense monster, so I didn't even bother. With Yugi, I had to reset about 9 or 10 times. With the dueling computer, I should have reset it a majority of the time. Getting a shield as a reward from the dueling computer implies they have several copies of it. Mind you, at this point, I didn't have torrential tributes, so whenever it landed on the field, I just hit the reset button. Dueling this guy means you have to constantly scramble to prevent their monster cards from being on the field for a turn. But the issue with that is the main reason why you're dueling it, the jars. As far as I knew at this point, this was the only way to get the flip effect cards Morphing Jar and Cyber Jar. Morphing discards both players' hands and makes both players draw 5 cards. This is probably the best card to cycle all those useless vanilla cards you have at the start. The drawback being that they draw 5 cards too, but I can assure you their decks are so ass they can't take advantage of it. Cyberjar destroys all monsters when flipped and makes both players draw 5 cards. Both players must then summon whatever low level cards they drew. I needed Cyberjar more for its draw power and not the destruction effect. Don't get me wrong, the effect is a plus, especially because anything with more than 2000 defense is an instant reset for me, so I need something to get rid of that shit. Unfortunately, my patience grew very thin and I didn't get either till way later in the game. From all the resets dueling Yugi and the computer, on top of Grandpa not dropping the pot of greed that I hope he would, I just got bored. I spent like 2 hours dueling these guys, and while the grind was mind-numbing, I was pretty satisfied with the level of cards I had, not gonna lie. The deck seemed good enough to hang, but not crazy enough to stomp the whole game into pieces. Speaking of stomping, let me show you the quote-unquote right way to grind. Remember when I said it's best to have a Zera deck over the other two? And the Zera deck is easily the best deck to have for the grind. For starters, Zera the Mat is one of the few cards you can use to beat over the walls and or huge monsters they summon from stalling. It's also your win con for beating the third CPU. See, if you beat this computer, you can easily get some of the best attackers in the game. La Jin, Vorse Raider, hell, it even drops Slate Warrior. The problem is not only do you have to beat an army of those cards mentioned, you also have to deal with all the trap cards they have. Always has Trap Hole, and it's the worst. However, with Zera, not only do you beat over everything in his deck, you also can't get hit by the Trap Hole since it only activates for normal summons. Ritual summoning is a special summon, and you can do as many special summons as you can during your turn.
There's just one small problem, and it's a big one.
Your win condition to grind is a ritual summon. The blue cards inherently suck. Ritual monsters are the Nigerian print scam of Yu-Gi-Oh! It's a summoning mechanic that's supposed to be a high risk, high reward, but it ends up always being an expensive mistake. They're so irrelevant that Konami forgot a card border already called Dibs on Blue when they made Link monsters. See, ritual cards cannot be normal summon or special summon by any other means. They must be summoned by their respective ritual magic card, and most rituals need you to pay a star cost to summon a monster. So Zera is an 8-star ritual monster. If you activate the ritual spell and pay the cost with 2 level 4 monsters, you can special summon Zera to the field. You can use cards in your hand or on the field as tribute. You cannot use the ritual monster itself as a cost. The monster must be summoned from the hand. Ritual spells only summon ritual cards in your hand unless it says otherwise. I have to say this because you have no idea how many people back in the day tried to pay the cost of a ritual monster with itself to summon it. It's definitely some paying the rent with Monopoly money type shit.
Isn't worth the paper it's printed on.
If you have 2 level 4 cards, you need 4 cards in total. You just drew 6 cards. You're telling me you're just gonna throw away half your hand with reckless abandon to summon a beater with no effect?
Homie, don't play that.
I personally wish that early ritual spells at this time could remove from play cards in the graveyard as a cost in addition. If not that, if you need 4 cards to summon 1 monster, you might as well give it protection effects. The mental gymnastics you have to do to even make this mechanic look okay would make Simone Biles blush. In the future, Konami realized that this summoning mechanic is utter dog shit by default, so to make it relevant in any capacity, majority of decks that focus on ritual summoning tend to have multiple effects to cheat them out as fast as possible. Other issues they fix with them is by giving the ritual monsters and spells other effects that can be used either while it's in the hand or graveyard. Old ritual cards are about as useful as a pork chop at a Jewish barbecue, so most times you're sitting on them for the majority of the duel. There are exceptions when it comes to good ritual cards, but they were very few compared to the majority. All this to say that this convoluted strategy is your key to grinding the 3rd computer duelist. If you start a duel and don't see any signs of Zero the Mant being summoned in the first few turns, surrender and try again. Keep trying this until you can steal a win and hopefully get some beaters from the raw statue. I don't know if the raw statue is the only one to give them, but it gave them to me most of the time consistently. After my own homemade method to grind, this is how the deck was looking. Humble amount of 14 to 1500 attackers, a 1600 and 1700 attacker that came from Yugi. Hey, great white with no shark in the name, kinda crazy, no? You could put dragon at the end, but not shark? I see what's going on here.
Last but not least,
2 timer scams that also came from Yugi. I don't know if it's rare or not, but it was a good pool. Time Wizard could flip a coin to destroy all cards on their side of the field or yours. The drawback is steep, but I'm mostly gonna use it as a comeback card. I got multiple cards with 2000 defense to keep them from beating me down with 1900 attackers, and torrentials to destroy everything I can't get over. Now I go back to triple duel with my first game being with Taya and proving exactly why you need card removal. Her deck is filled to the brim with cards that have 2000 defense. My first duel with her lasted 20 minutes and I ended up resetting out of anger. I wasn't losing, but this game is so lucky I have the patience to finish it for a video. Could only hope she fucks up and summons Forgiven Maiden in attack mode like Serenity did. Stupid! Tristan is back to sucking dick as usual, and the only thing worth mentioning in his deck is the Booty Goblins. A low level card with 2300, which is an anomaly. However, the drawback is that they are forced into defense position after they attack. Ideally, you'd like to have this card on the field to either out other problem cards or to wall your opponent out. But the AI is not as smart as Big Brother GPT, so the next duel starts with the Lord of Sack himself, Joey Wheeler, and the duel starts off pretty well with me having both of the fridge magnets in my hand. Genius. I had a plan to take things a bit slow, but it didn't matter because the very well designed card Change of Heart ruined everything.
did you give in?
Yoink!
No!
I lost 2,000 life points out of nowhere. Cards like Change of Heart and Snatch Steal will be the end of you if you feel bold enough to enter a triple duel with less than 2,000 life points. Looking at the back row, I was kinda scared that it was a trap card and I didn't really want to summon Beta into that. So I played something weaker to test the waters. I swing and Panther Warrior comes to the field and I lose 2,500 life now. Is that Mage Power and United We Stand? I didn't win because I'm the #1 duelist in the world. I won because you stink.
Who he talking to like that?
Damn, Yu-Gi-Oh players never escaping the allegations, huh? Talking crazy like he didn't luck sack his way into top decking a Monster Reborn, Mage Power, and United We Stand back to back. This feels out of character because I don't think Joey's the type of person to tell that to someone unprompted, but I made some cuck jokes about him in Sacred Cards, so I guess it's motivated by that. I beat Joey in the next duel, but it felt so bad to run through the other two again in the world's slowest duels possible. Joey overall has a lot of high attack power cards like the Booty Goblins, Axe Raider, and Zombira. Zombria? I'm not sure what it is.
The correct pronunciation is Zombria.
There's another low level card with abnormal stats but can attack directly. It also loses 200 attack points each time it beats a card, so you can kinda play around it, but I wouldn't suggest it.
You got this, Time Wizard! Time Wizard's effect activates! Time Roulette! Ah, no.
And my reward is...
That shit stinks!
The next stage starts with Bakura, and things were already off to a rough start. I sent his ace card Mahavilo to the graveyard at the beginning. When it's equipped with a card, it increases its own attack points by 500. Equipped cards stay face up on the field equipped to the monster, granting a boost or other effects. In every Yu-Gi-Oh game, he usually has a deck filled with equipped cards to force feed Mahavilo. In this duel, just by destroying the card, he immediately revives it with Premature Burial, a card that revives a monster and equips itself to it for a cost of 800 life points. It also has the drawback where if the card is destroyed, the monster goes with it. My only hope at this point now in the duel is to draw either Harpy's Feather Duster or Maneater.
Fucking playing with me, bitch.
When you lose this early in the triple duel, you only get one card. Shawty has several ways to annoy you with no intention of winning. First is the burn aspect of his deck. He has a permanent magic card called Chain Energy, which burns a player for 500 every time they activate a card. Two of these being on the field can make ugly scenarios where you must spend 1,000 life just to summon a monster. Attack and receive back shots burns for 700 damage, plus 300 for each copy of this card in the graveyard. Magic Thorns is the game's favorite perma trap that burns for 500 damage each time you discard a card. How does he make that happen? Well, that's where the deck starts to show its second objective, which is hand destruction. Card destruction for one, which discards the cards in both players' hands and replaces them, and the living fleshlights make it very easy for him to discard your cards. Since both jars draw him cards along with the fact that Morphing Jar is not limited in this game, it's kinda easy for him to reach the cards. The third job is to mill you out. He has 3 copies of Needleworm which mill 5 cards off the top of your deck if it's flipped, plus Gravekeeper Servant which mills a card every time you attack. And in case you have some problem cards, he has copies of Goblin Attack Force and Millennium Golem, which can be summoned by tributing cards with a BBL like Aqua Medora. Usually a deck like this is a gimmick at best, but in the context of this game, it's a nightmare. The intent behind the deck is to soften you up so that the next opponent can scum you out. Yami Yugi. I got scammed multiple times, not only because his deck is hard to dance with, but because I barely have any life points left once I reach him. I lost to him twice. One of the times he stained me with a very well designed card.
He manipulated you again?
The other was because of the oversized Pringles can. This card is a meme in real life, only to be relegated to playground duels. In the context of this game, it's a blight because it doesn't need to win them the game. It just needs to do enough to make it easier for the next guy to scam you. My last duel with Yugi had a rough start. I had less than 3,000 life points and I only had very weak cards in my hand. My turn I set 3 cards in pass and then he sets 2 in passes. The face down card was probably a trap hole, and it was. Unfortunately, I misplayed and put my dragon in defense mode beforehand. I think I zoned out or some shit at the time. He summoned Celtic Guardian and attacked. I can't really lose a card yet, so I spellbind it, which prevents him from attacking with that card. Millennium Shield, perfect card to stall with. I run the risk of just letting him summon a big monster, but I'd rather have a card on the field I know he can't run over. Even if he plays Raigeki, I have anti-Raigeki to counter it. A few turns pass and I'm now looking at a Gemini Elf, Slate Warrior, and the Dark Magician. I only got Time Wizard in my hand. Even if I have the shield, he has so much power on the board that one good magic card can end me. Also, the AI cheats like crazy. It never attempted to swing at the Millennium Shield. This bitch knew it had 3,000 defense. When the AI knows that you have a card with high defense that they can't run over, they decide not to swing into it. Sometimes they do, but the majority of the time they pretend they do not see it. It's times like this that Time Wizard starts to shine really bright, but the flips have to be better than the Flying Graysons, otherwise you're gonna end up like them. Now, the downside to Time Wizard, besides losing your soul to the Shadow Realm because of a flip, is leaving it in attack mode. Perfect for him to summon another Gemini Elf and make me lose 1,400 life points. And once again, several turns pass for him to build up another board, and now I gotta use a second Time Wizard to wipe again. And when he tried to finish me off, I flipped Torrential Tribute and finished him off. To be very honest, I did not deserve this win. Not only was I lucky with my flips, but for some reason the AI thought it was a good idea to leave Mystical Elf in attack mode and not attack into my second set card. So I was able to summon Amphibian Beast and put him in kill range. The struggle I had to go through kinda shows me the appeal of the game. On one hand, you don't have jack shit, and it's very frustrating to duel these people with nukes. It takes forever to get anything worth a damn, and the duels are grueling and slow. On the other hand, I feel a hint of something when I come out with a victory against the odds. I say a hint because a lot of the time it's just winning the duel by manipulating the dumb AI. Half the time it's not even on purpose, they just self-destruct themselves. Like, my nigga literally sacrifices Dark Magician for the Summon Skull. They have the same attack points. Now, in my win, I was awarded with a card that makes this game a lot more playable. Banner of Courage. I usually ignore this card in every other game, but I'm destitute in this game, and I need whatever I can get my hands on.
This fuck nigga was broke!
Hell, Wastelands is my best magic card so far, no joke. It's a permaspell that powers your monsters by 200 during your battle phase only. So my turn, my dragon has 1700, and on theirs, it's back to 1500. I suspect this might be a common card drop from Yami Yugi, cause I got it every time I lost to him. I might have been lucky as hell though, so take my experience with a grain of salt. If it's a common, I highly suggest fighting Yami Yugi and picking the Slifer statue to get copies of it. Only if you're a sick fuck like me that doesn't mind grinding old games like this. From what you've seen so far in this game, it looks unremarkable, right? But earlier in this video, I mentioned the fact that this game is a Platinum Hits title. Platinum means it hit 1 million in sales, no? Well, not really. Let's start from the top, because I want to start painting some theories I have on the game's production, along with some info deep in the crevices of the internet that I don't want to be lost in time. Starting with this rabbit hole of a thread. It starts with someone asking that they heard of a Yu-Gi-Oh game coming to the Xbox and asked around if anyone knows anything about it. Someone answers that the game will play closer to the rules of Yu-Gi-Oh and that the pending name is Yu-Gi-Oh Xbox. This is the name that you will see in old articles and previews of the game.
It's apparently going to be a card battle game instead of that god-awful crap that was in Forbidden Memories, Duels of the Roses, Frostbound Kingdoms, Blood Moon Stories, and the Sacred Card. What did you say, nigga?
You can shit on Forbidden Garbage, Boo Boo Kingdom, and the Sacred Boredom, but Duelist of the Roses?
Stop the cap!
Further down, someone shares info on the game from the Shonen Jump magazine and confirms that the game does not have a title even in the magazine. They share screenshots of the scans, but the link to it is dead and Wayback can't even really show me either. I tried to find the scans myself, but I can only find scans of the game after its release. However, because of all the members and patrons, I was able to go the distance and get a copy of the magazine. I've said in the past that being a Patreon member will help motivate me keep doing videos, and while that is a bit true, I think it more so motivates me to put my best foot forward when it comes to the research phase. Having the support helps me go the distance, so consider being a part of it all by being a member or a Patreon. If not that, a simple subscription to the channel along with liking and commenting on my vids is good enough for me. With this book in hand, I can confirm with my own 2 eyes, it does not have a name or release date. Keep in mind that the thread was made at the end of January, and this person had the March issue that had the screenshots of the game. Apparently, Shonen Jump would give members copies of the future months earlier. So by the time this issue was printed, it had no name or release date? Or did he? A user by the name of Familiar Stranger points out that it was shown at Jump Festa and claims that the game was under the name Xbox X Breed Yu-Gi-Oh! The King of Destiny. They later state that the game was available for pre-orders at EB Games under the name of Yu-Gi-Oh! X Breed, with the release date being March 16th. However, just a week before this post was made, they said GameStart started to list the game for pre-orders with the name of Dawn of Destiny, but a different release date being April 13th. Ultimately, the game ended up coming out in March 23rd, 2004. So even distributors were not even sure about the release date or the name. I know this all looks off topic, but trust me, this is all the paint for the picture. First off, is what this person saying even credible? Well, for starters, Familiar Stranger was a credible source of the Pojo forums at the time, it seems. They usually posted the spoilers of future sets, along with being an avid collector of any type of Yu-Gi-Oh! Media from Japan that they can get their hands on at the time. Some of the old info on Yu-Gi-Oh! Originates from them. While that alone might be good enough for most, I wanted to see if I can dig and find anything on the event. Now, I already had to dig deep just for the pictures of the event. Seeing all the Final Fantasy news and announcements took me down memory lane, cause I fucking love Final Fantasy X2, man. You have no idea. but nothing from Konami so far. I then dug deeper and found a blog of someone's visit to Jump Festa, and I'm assuming this is some Geo's City's blog site or something, but thankfully it's still up at the time of recording. It seemed like this person was visiting multiple booths at the event and was taking pictures, so I skimmed through and eventually I find something about Konami. I was so excited to read this gold mine only to see that this person was unable to visit the booth because there was a huge crowd for the Prince of Tennis voice actors. Man, fuck the Prince of Tennis. Why the fuck did it have to have so much motion at the time? Eventually I came across some listings of people selling guidebooks of Jump Festa. These were books that showed what companies had to show on the show floor at the time, and one of the listings had the Konami Super Guide for the year I was looking for. For now, it doesn't seem like I need to buy the book though, because right on the front page it has several Yu-Gi-Oh games they had at the event that later came out in 2004, including Capsule Coliseum, Destiny Board Traveler, World Championship 2004, and The Power of Chaos. Now, Dawn of Destiny is not spotted on the front page, and I don't have the book myself, but I think it's safe to assume it was there at Jump Festa along with these games as demos for the public at large to play. Now, what really sells it for me is the inclusion of the Power of Chaos game, which leads us into weird production lore and theories. See, the Power of Chaos and Dawn of Destiny was playable in an event at Japan, and both games did not come out in Japan. Mind you, that version of Power of Chaos was the Kaiba update, so they didn't even have the first part there. They just let people play a demo of an expansion of a game that did not come out there. That tells me that there may have been a Japanese version of both of these games, but they never bothered to release them, probably because the sales for both games were incredibly low compared to other games. But wait, didn't the game sell well? Okay, so even though it's a Platinum Hits title, Platinum Hits was just the name of the program like Greatest Hits. It's not the same kind of platinum like for album sales. This game barely sold 300k copies. The sales numbers required to be a plat hit is not out there as far as I saw, but if it's like any of Sony's greatest hits at the time, a game probably needed to sell over 250,000 copies. Mind you, for the time, that's a good amount, but to Konami, I don't think they saw it as much of a success. The air around this game feels very last minute, like a kid desperately trying to do a science project on the due date so they end up doing the boiling water project. No confirmed name of the game till damn near release. Meanwhile, the other games they showed at Jump Festa already had confirmed names. Not releasing the game at all in Japan, even though you showcase a playable version there for Japanese players. And the game is just a card simulator and doesn't follow the design philosophy they had for console games, which was, as a reminder, making console games display the core ideas and themes of Yu-Gi-Oh! And not much semblance to the physical card game. And you and I see from our own eyes how shoddily made this game is. Reused assets from multiple past Yu-Gi-Oh! Games, from the 3D models that came from Duelist of the Roses and Falsebound Kingdom, to some of the Forbidden Memory art renders.
Haram!
Wallahi, they put the hijab back. None of the models being animated, even though the majority of them already had animations they reused for past games, probably because they had no time to animate the new models they made for this game. I guess it's better for none of them to be animated than just have some, otherwise it looks dumber than it already is. Shoddy ass decks for the AI along with a piss poor AI, there is just so much that alludes to this game being rushed. What the hell was going on?
We'll talk about all of that later, cause for now I need to get back to the playthrough.
The next stage has Weevil, Rex, and Mako Tsunami. Usually I try to find workarounds to make the character's deck better, but with Weevil it's always difficult because insect cards just don't have enough meat for this game. If it was the GX era, maybe you could give him a Doom Dozer deck, but unfortunately he's stuck with Jurai Gumos and Maneater Bugs trying to carry the other 20 plus shit cards. The only way you can stop my Dino deck is if a meteor strikes Earth and creates another ice. Anyways, Mako is the real problem if you're unlucky. He has copies of Red Snake and the Pride Flag. With Umi, they get boosted to 2k attack power. Legendary Ocean counts as Umi and boosts his cards while also decreasing their level, so any level 5 cards can now be summoned without a tribute. To wrap this all up, he has a classic Tornado Wall combo which prevents him from losing life points if Umi is face up on the field. No gravity binds this time around, which I usually take issue with, but with how annoying this game is, I'd rather not deal with it. However, he does have the classic 3 copies of Torrential Tribute. Now if everything goes right, he's extremely annoying to fight. One game he drew all the right cards to set up his board, and even though I can get rid of the Tornado Wall and Umi, I can't overpower a field of cards with 17 and 1800 attack. That's what All Reliable is for. I've been lucky with it so far, so I hope I don't—
Okay, yeah, screw it. This is bullshit.
I should have known my luck was going to run out eventually. I shitted on him on the run back, and I realized that his deck revolves around too many level 5 cards. I get you want him to summon his dad, but did you have to make every card in the deck level 5? This would make more sense if he had 3 copies of Legendary Ocean, but he only has 1, so Brick City? Next stage starts with Bones, and I'm going to skip over him and just put his zombies back in the grave where they belong. My duel with Keith starts off pretty well with Beta destroying a card, only for him in turn to summon Mechanical Chaser and retaliate. That shit is 1850, which, by the way, thank God they stopped doing that 50 shit.
What he say fuck me for?
I drew Stone Soldier right on time, and by the time I blinked, it was gone. He used Limiter Removal, which is a quick play magic card that doubles the attack of machine cards. In return, the cards are destroyed at the end of the turn, so I get to breathe a little at least. The duel goes on and the computer starts to show why it has the decision-making skills of a toaster.
I comprehend.
If there was a high-level monster it can summon, it will summon them regardless of the board state. He constantly tributed high attack power monsters for lower attack cards. At one point, he tributed both his Cyber Alligator and Mechanical Chaser for Konami's favorite card, Slot Machine. Then he tributes the Slot Machine for a Yugi Boomer's worst nightmare, Pendulum Machine. Speaking of Yugi Boomers,
Whoa! I'm not reading that crap.
be having nightmares about Pegasus cards to this day. Forget about Nirvana, just show them a Relinquish or Toon cards and they're gonna think that text is gonna jump at them like Freddy Krueger. Pegasus comes up next, and I wish they just focused on the Relinquish part of the deck and not the Toons. Relinquish is his ace monster and probably the best ritual monster in the game for years. It's a level 1, so that means any monster can be used as a cost for the ritual summon. It has the effect to take one monster card on the field and equip it to itself to steal its stats, but it can only equip one card at a time. It also gives protection from battle by using the equip card as a shield and throwing it away, and from there it can steal a card again. The fusion version of it does the same thing, but also prevents any other monster from attacking, which makes the duel drag so much longer. Combined with the Solemn Wishes, you might as well reset if the life points get as high as the unemployed nigga. Now this might sound like I'm gassing up his deck, but the compliments in there. His hands are as dead as my Facebook profile. Even though Relinquish is way easier to summon than most ritual monsters, you still need Relinquish, the ritual spell, and another monster on top of all that. And for Restrict, he needs 3 specific cards. He only has 1 copy of Idol, which means the chances for him to summon Restrict are extremely low. The cherry on top of all this dog food is the Toon cards. I've explained why these cards suck ass many times before, but this is the last time I get to talk about them for a long time, I think. Toon monsters cannot be summoned to the field unless you have a Toon World face up on the field. Toon World is a perma spell that does absolutely nothing but stain you for 1000 life points for some reason. Once Toon World is face up on the field, you can summon Toons. However, they have summoning sickness, meaning they cannot attack the turn that they are summoned. This is because Toon monsters can attack directly unless your opponent has a Toon monster, which is highly unlikely. What the fuck is that effect even here for? Now, you might think a mirror match with Toon monsters might be rough because of that, but I promise you, Toons would be a lot better in a mirror match than against anything else. Crazy part is, I ain't get to the worst part of it all. If the Toon World is gone in any way or fashion, all the Toon cards go with it. I really don't get why they were so scared to make the Toon cards any decent. At the time, there wasn't a ban list, so it's not like they could design cards with reckless abandon yet. But if you remove half the restriction on these guys, I don't think they would have put much of a dent in the game. Eventually they did with the New Testament Toons. Now they don't need Toon World to be summoned, and it's still not enough for them to do anything. Toon cards be reading like the side effects in commercial medicine. Playing Toons
can lead to coma or death.
I can't get over the fact that these cards read like a page source just to do nothing. Maybe it's because I played the game for a long time, but with the usual too much text suspects, I tend to read these and go, under the right circumstances, this card can destroy cards, negate a card, and search for a normal spell card if destroyed by battle. In a weird way, it feels rewarding to read the card because you come out thinking, okay, it actually does something. Every time I read an old Toon card, it just pisses me off because under the right circumstances, it does nothing. Now you're just thinking this deck has cancer. What a waste of ink. Speaking of waste of ink, for a brief time this archetype had a Frog the Jam moment. About 2 or 3 cards had to specify manga reran in the card effect because it doesn't have Toon in the name. This is due to some wacky localization decisions. So in Japan this card is called Dragon Egg, and when it's a Toon monster it's called Toon Dragon Egg. So they figured if it has an English name in Japan, why not give it a Japanese name over here? Also, I haven't really said the full name of the card over there in Japan because if I do, I feel like I'm gonna end up with the yellow dollar sign. I'm pretty sure the localization team probably thought the same thing I was thinking when I said the name out loud, so that probably motivated them to be a bit more fancy with the localization process of this card. Reran literally means dragon egg, but the manga reran part is kinda strange. You would think they would call it Toon Reran, but instead it's called manga reran due to an error of understanding. See, in the manga, Pegasus says manga reran more as a joke with his broken Japanese, but they took it as his literal name and just ran with it. Now, anytime that you want to make a Toon card that has to specify Toon in the name, you have to put manga reran in the card effect. After the creation of Toon Dark Magician in 2016, the localizers at the time realized that they cannot continue this nonsense of adding manga reran to every Toon card in the future. So they decided to errata the card and just add, this card is always treated as a Toon card in its card effect. None of this has anything to do with Dawn of Destiny, but I find small things like this funny as hell, so you gotta hold up.
Now remember that, because the more you know.
The next stage has 2 new faces and 1 returning. Mai has the usual Harpy deck where she tries to play Rising Air Current to boost her cards up to 2000 plus attack. Her Harpy deck only has the regular Harpy ladies though, no effect versions or cyber ones. Elegant Egotist allows her to summon Harpy ladies if she controls a Harpy on the field. Harpy lady sisters can only be summoned by Egotist, which can only activate by having a Harpy lady. By now you should know that if any card has that many conjunctions attached to it, it's probably the biggest piece of dog shit. You can't even normal summon this card for some reason. Combine that dead ass card with the 3 copies of Pet Dragon that she will never summon, plus multiple trap cards that need specific board states to be of any use, and you start to see why she had to cheat to get her wins. I already threw Yugi's deck into the sea earlier and not much changes here, so I'll move things along to the main course, Kaiba. So Kaiba's issue every game is the fact that his deck must have 3 blue eyes white dragons to reflect the lore. In most points of Yu-Gi-Oh history, cards that need 2 tributes are usually no good. Unless the card has a godlike effect, it's too much of an investment into a card that can just die in 1 turn. Now, to circumvent this glaring flaw, they usually do one of 2 things in the Yu-Gi-Oh games. 1, make his deck focus around Cyberstein OTK, which uses a card to special summon Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon for a hefty price, or Lord of D. Lord of D combined with the Flute of Summoning Dragon allows him to summon dragons from his hand for free. A bit of a gimmick, but it's better than what's here. His deck has 13 high-level monsters, and I have no idea why half of these are even in here. He has more high-level cards than low-level cards to tribute. Why does he have a copy of Barrel Dragon? That's not even his card, that's Keith's. Stage 7 starts with the introduction of Rare Hunters. Oh man, this can go one of 2 ways. Some games, these guys are just total pushovers because the themes of their decks just doesn't lend them enough juice to be threatening. Other way is that they cheat like their life depends on it, which to be fair, it kinda does in their situations in the manga. So String suffers not only from bad deck design, he also suffers from the fact that his signature card is not in his deck. Revival Gem is his main card, and it has the effect to revive itself after losing in battle for a price. At first, I thought it wasn't in the game, but upon looking at his reward list, you can get Revival Gem from him in a triple duel. So they just straight up didn't even try with this guy. From my point of view, this is pretty funny if I think about it, because in 04 they also didn't give him a Revival Gem and instead just gave him the same 6 cards every opponent had in that game. In this game, they didn't even bother to give him a functioning deck in return. Upon a closer look, his deck looks like it's mocking the fact that he's a puppet being controlled by Merit. Golems, Rogue Doll, he does kind of look like Illusionist Face Mage. Bald ass nigga, I just wanna... Arcana's deck is filled with traps to the brim to soften you up for the next guy. Multiple copies of trap cards that destroy your monsters. Ring of Destruction is a scary ass card in the context of this game because you don't want to lose too many life points in between rounds, but it's difficult to achieve that with cards like that flying around. They should have named this game Yu-Gi-Oh! Dick in a Box because this card starts to be in almost every deck from here on out. It's a perma trap, and whenever you attack with a card, you gotta flip a coin. You get it right, your attack passes through. You get it wrong, and your card goes down to 0 attack. Now normally this card is annoying but not troublesome because in most Yu-Gi-Oh games and in real life, you typically have multiple cards that destroy magic and trap cards. In this game, that's not the case. Best they can do for you is give you a Feather Duster and Royal Decree. Shit, every other game at least gives you Remove Trap. The game plan the devs might have been going for goes like this. He sets one of the multiple fat ass walls that he has in his deck and he sets several trap cards. You summon and you attack with a card. Oops, that card has 2000 defense, but your card has 1700, so it's not a big deal, right? Well, with the Fairy Box, you can potentially go to 0 attack and lose 2000 life points instead. And with enough failed flips, he can summon his Dark Magician and start attacking you. Now that's how a duel can go if you're a bot. There's no way any thinking human being would continue to attack into defense mode cards, even if the cards are set, because you know most of them probably have 2000 defense. The second thing is how shitty his deck is. He summons nothing for several turns half the time and eats nothing but dick because half of his deck is filled with high level cards. 3 Dark Magicians, 2 Rock Spirits, which I have no clue why it's in the deck, 2 Leo Wizards, 2 Faceless Mages, 9 high level cards overall. Wanna know how many low level cards he has? 8. Multiple decks in this game are designed like this as if the logic of having equal amounts of high and low level cards makes sense. Look at these 8 low level cards, right? Let's say somehow in the duel he was able to summon 3 Dark Magicians. Each Dark Magician needs 2 cards to be normal summoned. By summoning all 3 Dark Magicians, he now has only 2 low level cards in the deck. How the fuck is he supposed to summon anything else? At best, he could probably summon 2 more high-level monsters since they only need 1 tribute, but that just leaves 4 dead-ass cards in his deck. Mind you, this is the best case scenario that has a less than 1% chance of happening. Most of this game in itself is exactly this, and it sucks because on one hand, the game seems okay, but this drags it down so much because a lot of the time, you're not even dueling, to be very honest. This problem starts to rear its ugly head as soon as you reach Mako, because his deck hinges on having Legendary Ocean to make all the 5-star cards 4 stars. But why make his deck like that when you could just give him good level 4 cards? Alright, let's cut the bullshit. You know exactly who this is, and you know how it can go. But just in case, the TLDR is that he tries to get Exodia pieces to his hand as fast as possible. If he has all 5 pieces, he wins automatically. He usually does this by cheating, but the other 2 dudes didn't cheat, so maybe I have a chance.
You're worse than a murderer! You're worse than a terrorist!
This guy is the one big roadblock of the game. I lost to him several times on the first or second turn. When I say he cheats, it's not like the kind of cheating kids do on the playground like drawing extra cards. He cheats by having multiple copies of restricted cards. 3 copies of Graceful Charity, 3 Pot of Greeds, 3 of each Exodia piece, etc. Thus making it way easier for him to get all 5 pieces of Exodia ASAP. Now usually cards like the Liquid Duo, Forceful Sentry, Card Destruction, etc. would be available to get in other games, but not this one. Not because they're not in the game, but I have no idea where you're supposed to get them or if you're even able to get them at this point in the game. You have no way to cause hand destruction to shit on his plan at this point. I didn't know where I could get the magic cards that cost the hand destruction, but I did know 2 effect monsters I could get my hands on that will help: Morphing Jar and Cyber Jar. After losing to him about 5 times and not seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, I just caved in and went to grinding.
While we grind for the jars, let me talk your ear off a bit.
Here is my hairball theory. Some parts are close to the truth, but others should be taken with a grain of salt because ultimately, I don't know shit. This is what I can piece together based on Konami's timeline. Konami in 2003 to 2004 was working on a lot of projects, with a lot of the staff working on 2 to 4 games at a time. Now other companies were obviously crunching at the time, but they weren't moving this stupid. For reference, there was a pattern back in the day where companies will have an all hands on deck for the bigger projects, with the majority of people working on that singular project. For the lesser projects, they would have several workers take on 2 to 3 games at the same time, probably to fill in the release schedule or something. Now, as you would imagine, when their focus is scattered amongst multiple projects, they're probably not going to be able to put their best foot forward. You can't convince me some of these games are real. Boy, slow down with all that bullshit. It doesn't take a genius to deduce that these games were mid. In any field, no matter what, you won't get quality work if the team is spread out too thin.
But anywho,
During these projects, somewhere in the mix, they were approached by Microsoft.
Konnichiwa, Mini-san.
Now understand at this point in time, Microsoft was just throwing money at any Japanese dev to make exclusives for their game console. I think when Microsoft approached them while their hands were already tied with all this mid, they figured to scrounge up something fast to pocket the money real quick. Now, how did I come around to that? First, we have to look at some examples of Microsoft throwing money at Japanese devs for exclusive games. Things like Atlas with SMT9, Tecmo with DOA, Level 5 with True Fantasy Live Online, Phantom Dust, a game I would love to cover on the channel, and many others. Now, some of these games came out with record-breaking success, and the majority of them were canceled projects with nightmare levels of production or bound to one country. The experience being so bad for some of the companies that it soured the reputation of Microsoft to Japanese devs. Hell, Level 5's president and CEO outright stated that the major reason they canceled their game was due to poor relations between them and Microsoft, and that they were inexperienced in dealing with Japanese developers. He also implied that the two companies did not part on the best of terms and thinks the two companies will just most likely never work together again, which remained true for years until Ni no Kuni 2. They didn't even bother with putting that game on the Xbox till 2023. So how was Konami's relationship with them? Pretty fine, actually. You thought you was being set up to be told that they had a rocky relationship, but nope.
Now see, the reason I chose Level 5 as an example is because the rumors at the time was saying that they used some of the money from Microsoft for other ventures.
Some going as far to say that this is possibly a fake game made with the intent to siphon money from Microsoft by working on a game that they knew could not really exist at the time realistically because of hardware limitations of the Xbox.
Like the more I unravel this thread, the more I'm like, oh, this like straight up could not have run on an Xbox.
It's not so out of the realm of possibility because a lot of the assets within the cancel game was, from the looks of it, retooled for Dragon Quest VIII. The president of Level 5 at the time has an interview saying that around the same time that the company grew bigger was when they developed the relationship with Microsoft. It seems suspicious that the company became much more ambitious once you had this relationship, but who knows? At the end of the day, it's just rumors. Take it with a grain of salt. There is a video on YouTube that goes into it much deeper than I can in this video, and I'll link it below. Another game that has this same type of rumor is SMT9 and SMT3. SMT9 was an Xbox exclusive game in Japan that never came overseas, and SMT3 is an iconic RPG that's held as one of the best PS2 games in general. These games have a long and weird development history, so I'll present you the facts and then the rumors. The facts are that SMT3 started development in 2000, but they have gone on record to say it was mostly just them trying to get used to transitioning to 3D. Then started full development in 2002. Emphasis on full development. In 2001, SMT9 started development as an Xbox exclusive, with a game being in the early stages in October. This game was mostly outsourced and developed by Next Entertainment.
This was also another game that was supposed to have online play, but was biting off more than it could chew at the time.
SMT9 comes out in 2002 of December, and SMT3 comes out in February of 2003. That's where the facts end. The theory is that SMT3 starts development in the year 2000, but the time was mostly used to understand the transition to 3D. Somewhere along the line, Microsoft approaches them and gives them money for a title. So Atlas takes the money, outsources most of the work at the cost of peanuts, and uses the rest of the money to help fund SMT3. Hence the weird full development line that you'll see from time to time when you read up the development cycle of this game. Like, straight from Okada's mouth, the actual development of the game was done all at once in the last year, 2002 at the time. These are just rumors, but I'm just using these rumors as the paint that'll be used for the painting. Cause my theory is basically in the same realm as being a rumor. And this is what these rumors typically sound like. I felt the rumors around these two games specifically felt more fitting than most of the other stuff that Microsoft tried to throw money at and it never happened, such as Scalebound, or a situation like Phantom Dust where you have a game that they themselves poured all their money into developing only to release it in Japan and never publish it in America themselves.
And Microsoft made a unilateral decision not to publish a game, their game that they developed themselves and paid for completely, so that would be the end of it.
Konami takes the money to make an exclusive Yu-Gi-Oh game and uses the bulk of the money for other projects while they give Microsoft anything they could conjure up in the shortest amount of time possible. It's just a theory, but when I think about the quality of the other console games, it really does make this game look fake as hell. Look at how much is going into the other console games. A card game tactical RPG with 2 full story campaigns filled with 3D models that are animated. A weird real-time strategy tower defense RPG with new models and animations along with 3 campaigns this time and a bonus battle mode. I have a whole video on Capsule Coliseum, so you should probably take a look at that video when you have the chance, but the production in that game is insane. It's a gorgeous looking game, and it has full-on voice acting too, first in the series.
Amongst these games, Dawn of Destiny sticks out like a turd in a fruit bowl. This game looks so fake.
That's really funny to say because this is the only game that actually plays like the TCG amongst the console games, and the other games probably look more fake to modern Yu-Gi-Oh fans than this does. Even though most of those games are considered bad to mid, you can tell there's a lot of effort to make those games as unique as possible. But this game is low-key just a shoddy port of World Championship 2004. It probably reuses the same AI in 2004 and multiple people online suspect that's the case.
But that's enough of the Schizo posting. It's time to get back to the game.
And look what we have here. I beat him without even using the pots. What was even the point of grinding? In fact, I forgot to even put them in the deck for a while, so oops. The next stage has Esperoba, Loomis Umbra, and Merrick.
I'm gonna keep it real, I'm not wasting your time or my time writing about these 2 duelists.
I shitted on them without even seeing what they can do. I do not care, and I don't even want to try to care, because the real main course is Merrick. Duels with him is so funny because your life can go from this to this in a matter of seconds. He does the same old usual hand destruction. Flip the magic thorns to burn you for 500 each time he makes you discard cards. He has way more cards to do this than Shoddy since his deck is much more focused on hand destruction than Shoddy's. The Liquid Duo is a card where he pays 1,000 life points and discards a random card in your hand, and then you have to choose the other to discard. Tribute to the Doom makes him discard a card to pop a monster you own. Combo with the Phantom, he will go even if that card touches your life points and makes you discard a card. Just Desserts burns you for each monster you own, so at the least it can do 500 life point damage, and at most it could do 2,500. It seems the AI is specifically programmed to only activate the card if it can deal 1,000 or more damage. There were times where I activated a card that destroys the back row, but he would not change the Just Desserts because I only had 1 monster. He has Ring of Destruction because I don't think you could call it a burn deck without it. Merrick has several good stuff monsters like Voice Raider, Man-Eater Bug, Magician of Faith, so overall you're kinda finding a competent deck. Of all the jars in the game, the one I hate the most is Morphing Jar number 2. When this card flips face up, shuffle all monsters on the field into the deck. To me, this is so much worse than losing the cards, cause at least I can still use the cards in the graveyard as a resource. Majority of duels, you don't even see half the cards in your deck, so consider those cards non-existent now. After that, each player draws cards until you both have drawn enough monsters equal to the amount of your cards that got shuffled back into the deck. Then you summon those monsters face down if they are level 4 or lower. Now, unlike Cyber Jar where you can keep the other cards, Morphing Jar number 2 makes you throw them away. Not only does it throw away your best magic and trap cards possibly, but against his deck, you lose life points each time you discard them because of the thorns. This combo was so insane, I legit had to rethink every attack on face down cards. He never flips up the jars himself, but clearly you can't just sit and do nothing. My answer to the jars was to set Man-Eater Bug and wait a turn to destroy whatever felt like a Morphing Jar. Now, that was in the future duels I had with him, cause my first time with him, he bricked. Every other time I dueled him, it was a nightmare, so I got really lucky on the first try. The siblings. Let's start with her.
This is the second roadblock in the game, and it's very unreasonable for them to expect you to beat full power Ishizu tier.
Fight!
Low hanging fruit aside, she has a Fire Princess burn deck with a few beast sticks to back it up. She doesn't have a way to get the Fire Princess on the field ASAP, so her deck feels kinda lost in what it's supposed to do. Could you guys please stop leaving the damn turtle out of these fire decks?
Next is Odeon, and with the way his deck is, you're gonna do him worse than his dad. This might be the worst version of Odeon.
His usual issue is not playing magic and trap card removal to get rid of troublesome cards like Royal Decree, which shuts down his whole deck. But in this game, they forgot to give him a win condition. The only attacker he has in his deck is Slate Warrior. All his other monsters are flip effect cards with horrendous stats. What's the point of having all these traps with no monsters to capitalize on the destruction? Last is Yami Merrick. His deck is so polarizing, and I don't even know where to start. First off, he's another dick-in-the-box merchant. A lot of the other duelists use this dumbass card as well, by the way. However, the dick-in-the-box conflicts with Gravity Bind, which prevents level 4 and higher cards from attacking. Why stop me from attacking when you have copies of cards that want the opposite? Gravekeeper Servant stays in theme with his background and usual deck destruction antics, but again, Gravity Bind doesn't let me attack. So why have this card in your deck? Now, the funny thing about this deck is that it follows one of the ideas I had for strings in World Championship 2004, but left it out the script because the video was long as hell. I gave strings a deck based around Muka Muka since it had a similar effect to Slifer where it gets stronger the more cards he has in his hand. Merrick has the same idea, but not nearly as consistent to make it a threat. Most times the Muka Muka is weak as hell because the AI must activate and set every single magic and trap card. Merrick has a lot of good cards, but not only is the deck unfocused, but the only attackers he has is Force Raider and maybe Muka Muka. So just like Odeon, he can't really capitalize on the destruction from his cards. The quality of the opponents in this game start off too high, only to sink the rock bottom for the dumbest reasons. I get that you can't make the deck super complex because the AI is too much of a dipshit, but come on, at least give them a win condition. Well, that's the last opponent I want to go in depth with. What you say? Yami Bakura?
Sorry, no twinks allowed.
At this point in the game, the rest of the stages are repeat opponents with them having more life points than before and no other changes. Once you beat the 12th and 13th stages, credits unlock, which kinda signifies that you beat the game, I guess? It's kinda weird that even happens when you're 2 or 3 stages away from finishing this mode. Why not save the credits till the end of the triple duel? It's as if they don't want you to play this game any longer. Now, as a warning for anyone who somehow still has an interest in playing this game, one of the later stages is literally just 3 rare hunters with Exodia decks.
Let's go gambling! Aw, dang it.
If you didn't grind for the jars or any card destruction, you probably will now. This stage is probably the biggest fuck you I've seen in one of these games. I feel like they could have had a more interesting combination in the later stages, like all 3 main villains in the stage and not 3 dual computers for the final stage. What a lackluster end to a lackluster game. Originally, this video was going to be a quick pump and dump holdover video for the viewers while they wait for the 2005 video. But when I saw the credits, I decided to put more effort into the script because I saw this monster. That is a 3D model of Toon Dark Magician Girl. That's really cool considering the fact that the card did not come out in the TCG till 2006. She appears as a card in Reshuffle Destruction and Sacred Cards, which is probably the soonest the average person in the States even knew that this card exists unless you had the internet. But those games do not play like the TCG. This game does, and it would have been the first instance you can test this card. Well, how do you get the card? It's simple, you get it from Pegasus, right? He doesn't have the card in his deck or rewards. In fact, no one has it as a reward because you can't get it. It's not in the game at all. You made this whole ass model and animation just for the card to not be in the game? That's more work than just making and programming the card, especially when you did that for every other Toon card. Now, there have been times where cards are straight up unattainable even though it's in the game, like Dark Magician Girl and Dungeon Dice Monsters. Why is it constantly Dark Magician Girl? But in this game, I'm not even sure about that. If someone can look at the files of this game one day, please let me know. This is why I went down the series of rabbit holes for this game, because nothing says rushed more than unused assets in your credits. What doesn't help is the fact that this game is missing a lot of cards too. Besides the usual suspects that make this era of Yu-Gi-Oh! Interesting, like Last Will, Scapegoat, Reasoning, etc., it's also missing cards that make up whole ass decks. 2004 missing Gravekeeper, so you can't make a Gravekeeper deck? Don't worry, cause in Dawn of Destiny, all of them are missing. Damn, Pegasus bricks like crazy. When is he gonna play Manju or Senju? Oh wait, never mind, they're not in the game, so ritual decks are not even something to entertain in this. For reference, World Championship 2004 has 1,138 cards. Dawn of Destiny has 1,017. I'm usually not one to stress over missing cards, especially in future games, because there's just so much variety in the number of decks you can make in future titles. But for the early titles, it feels crucial for these games to have these cards, but they just go missing and you're just left with this actual caveman Yu-Gi-Oh shit. No wonder people have more fond memories of games that don't play like the TCG. You took all the fun out of it. Now, to be fair, on the spectrum of decisions they can make, one of them would be making the game with no models and all of the cards. I feel the game would have been much more interesting this way, but they probably can't pick this option when being pressed to make a Yu-Gi-Oh game on the most powerful console at the time. I can imagine someone saying this is the best you could come up with, slamming JPEGs on a board. Slide the game on the scale a bit this way, and there was a choice to have everything, but you and me both know they probably didn't have enough time and staff to realistically do this. Yu-Gi-Oh games be having like 30 people working on the game, while other games tend to have 100 plus. At this point, I can make a guess that they were pigeonholed to have just some of everything, making a lukewarm experience. And ultimately, I think the game's fate of being forgotten was sealed the moment it was put on the Xbox. If you're a Yu-Gi-Oh fan at this point, you probably have a GBA or a PS2, because not only did those consoles do fucking numbers, they both already had an install base of Yu-Gi-Oh players. So many Yu-Gi-Oh games were coming out on the Game Boy and the PlayStation that you're more than likely to get the next console in the line in hopes to get more Yu-Gi-Oh games on those consoles. You're not buying an Xbox with the expectation of a Yu-Gi-Oh game coming to it soon, a good one at that even. The more I sat and played this game, the more I started to see why Konami made the console games the way they are. If both the console games and the GBA games played just like the TCG, why would anyone buy the console games over the portable games? The console games already have to compete with the idea that it's just easier to play in real life with friends, and you want them to also compete with their own GBA games? With the GBA games, at the very least, you can go around and do some link duels. But with Dawn of Destiny, the only way to duel another person is by having them bring their own Xbox, a TV, and connect them by LAN? Now, you could say if they put more time and effort into the game that plays like a TCG, it would have more purpose and that it playing like the TCG would be fine. The reality is that at the time, I don't really think Konami had the ability to deliver such a game. The amount of games that Konami was working on at the time simply doesn't allow for them to give any Yu-Gi-Oh game time to cook. The quality of in-house Yu-Gi-Oh games take a huge dip between 2004 or 5. Now, I think another reason why they went about things the way they did is because it would be a tall order to make a TCG game on the console often. With the schedule of games that they wanted to pump out already, they knew they couldn't make hundreds of new models on top of everything else. The ceiling of expectations on the console is much higher than a handheld. You can get away with PNGs and RPG Maker effects on a handheld, but doing that with a full price game on console? Let me talk about something I feel is the biggest takeaway of the game. Often I get a comment asking what my opinion on the OST is or why I never mention it. The reason is because personally, I can't allow 30 seconds to a minute of a video to let the audience listen to small quips of the OST. Unironically, coming from a guy that's making an almost 2-hour video about an old ass Yu-Gi-Oh game no one gives a shit about, by the way. I don't mind it when others do it, I just can't see myself doing it. You don't like it when you're in the mall and all of a sudden you're taken to the side to smell some perfumes. So why would I do that to you with an OST? Or at least that's my thought process. So let me just say that I think the OST of multiple Yu-Gi-Oh games and just other card battlers in general have some of the best tracks I have ever heard in video games. I think they follow near the same logic fighting game composers have, where they try to make tracks with the purpose of stealing your attention from the game. For card battlers, I think this is very necessary because to the outsider looking in, these games are just cards slamming into each other. However, the OST for some of them are pretty stinky.
Cut that bitch off!
So this is how I leave tells on my opinion on the OST in my videos. If you listen to one of them and you hear the OST from the game at all, I'm of the opinion that it has some knee slappers. If nothing from the OST plays, like how I'm not gonna play a single track from World Championship 2005 when I edit that video, then you know the OST is trash. I bring this all up to say this game's OST is one of the best I've heard in the series. I used to scour YouTube for tracks in this game as a kid, but because not many people played this game, the OST used to be drip fed to YouTube very slowly over the years. It wasn't until like 2 years ago someone finally uploaded the victory music of the game. Who knows what other tracks are still lost out there deep in the Vatican. There is a website that holds most of the tracks from this game's OST, but I've recently discovered that half of them do not loop at the right time. So yeah, this game is cursed to never have its OST uploaded in the best quality possible. The more these games I cover, the more I got curious to explore why the game is so bad or good in certain aspects. Like the game's OST to me sounds way too good for a Yu-Gi-Oh game. I got my answer to this question while looking at the credits, and I recognized some of these names.
Oh, fuck.
Hibino is a legend to me and is a well-decorated composer that's had a hand in multiple games. Metal Gear, Zoe, Bayonetta, and Solar Boy, which I don't know much about as well besides the fact that some of the characters appear in Battle Network games. I thought this was a Battle Network character before knowing he had his own games. He's also responsible for a lot of tracks in the GBA Yu-Gi-Oh games, and you can hear some of the motifs used in those games used here. This game has an all-star cast of composers to me, which explains why the music is just so good. Dawn of Destiny is an overpriced album that comes with a game as a bonus. Hibino has a lot of interviews where he low-key drops hints at how his time was at Konami. In a couple interviews, he notes how on multiple days he had to make tracks for several games in one day, making tracks for Beatmania, Metal Gear Solid, and Solar Boy all in the same day for multiple days. He was at a point where he was making 12 songs a day for Solar Boy.
For example, I do Dawn of Zindas in the morning, maybe in the afternoon, I do some maybe Beatmania kind of thing.
Okay.
Then in the evening, I do a little bit of Metal Gear. Sometimes like that. So I only compose this song after song because I was really busy at the time in 2003. And I remember I composed like 12 songs per day for birthday.
Doesn't that kind of sound like... Hibino got into playing instruments as early as the age of 4 and eventually landed on being an expert of the saxophone. Throughout his years, the genre of music that influenced him the most was jazz, and it shows in his work, being noted to have a style that can be described as metalized symphonic jazz, which probably explains why several Yu-Gi-Oh games have jazzy tracks, but that would explain why the ones he worked on have a jazz fusion influence. What about the others? Toshihisa Furusawa is the man behind the OST of the games that followed the TCG rulings such as Eternal Duelist Soul, 2004, Duel Academy, and so on. He also had a huge hand in making the music for the majority of the Shaman King games at the time. This guy is one of the many enigmas when it comes to the staff of Konami. However, I did find some things about his recent works. The first thing being that he's a part of a group that does live performances every now and then called 3. They even have an album out and multiple recordings of their performances on YouTube, so I'll link the channels below for those who are interested in hearing the work of someone who played a major role in these games. This group is a jazz group, which again further amplifies the jazz influence in Yu-Gi-Oh! Second, Daisuke Kurosawa is the creator of the opening theme song in Mr. Osomatsu. I know, what the fuck does this guy or anime have to do with anything? Well, in an old thread, this guy not only confirms that Furusawa played the bass in what I assume is the opening, but he also confirms Furusawa wrote the music for Mr. Osomatsu. I can't find that documented anywhere, so this might be news to those who actively seek to preserve credits. He also notes that he's one of the best bass players he had the pleasure to play with, and this was a sentiment I saw a lot across the Japanese side of the net. There are so many comments of people saying he's one of the best bass players to do it, but no one knows anything about him beyond that. The last thing was that I came across a blog of a Yu-Gi-Oh fan in Japan that loved the OST of the Tag Force games, which apparently he also had a hand in, but I'm not entirely sure since the credits for some of them are not documented yet. Anyways, this fan has been to his group's live performances multiple times, and he has several conversations with the bass player. He even got a chance to talk about the Yu-Gi-Oh games with him, but unfortunately, he's never written down the exchanges as promised. No diss to them, probably forgot to do it, and the convo has long since left their mind. I can only hope that one day he could come out in an interview and talk about his thoughts on the tracks that he made at the time long ago.
Ozaki is someone that I want to save for a future conversation, but it's no secret that he too was influenced by jazz. Just listen to all this. He's more than likely the guy behind most of the music behind the most well-beloved Yu-Gi-Oh games, with a lot of his music being played in YouTube videos to this very day. I wonder if he'll ever know the weight of his impact. Toshiyuki Kakuta, aka LED, is a composer and sound director for multiple Beatmania and DDR games. I have to admit, as someone who plays a huge variety of games and appreciate the art that comes from the medium, rhythm games have always been a blind spot for me. It's not that I'm not interested in the genre, just nothing ever caught my eye until working on this video. This guy is well decorated and has been in charge of the music in Beatmania for years. I don't think I'm the one to do him justice in this video, especially since this is the only Yu-Gi-Oh game he worked on, so there's not much more for me to say about him that's Yu-Gi-Oh related. However, I will say I'm a lot more interested in trying these games now than before because I got hit by a huge wave of FOMO looking at these games. So we have two composers that have jazz on the mind 24/7, and one that I can make a bold assumption that was heavily influenced by jazz as well. No wonder Yu-Gi-Oh games ended up sounding the way they do. But why jazz of all things? Not that I have any issues with that for obvious reasons. But to most this might seem random, no? Well, if you're into the music side of things, you'll know that people who commonly interview composers from Japan have noted that a majority of them are heavily inspired by jazz and jazz fusion.
If you take a look at the background, if you can find any bios on these musicians and composers that made music for these games in anime and J-pop, they are all influenced by American jazz.
So it's kind of par for the course over there. Habino has said in interviews before that his parents would mostly play jazz music in the house during his upbringing, and I don't want to say this is how it was for everyone, but the more I read into the fact that jazz is huge over there, the more it started to click.
Pack your things. We're heading for Tokyo.
See, after the war, the US placed a number of bases in Japan. Now, there are a lot of talking points about the US occupation, and that convo is its own rabbit hole, so I won't touch on the good and bad too much there. What I will say is that naturally, a lot of the culture started to be imported into the country from this arrangement. The Western way of life and art started to take root, and the art form that natives took a particular liking to was jazz. Post-war on and off bases, you would have US soldiers sitting around the country, and naturally some of them would bring along their skills and talents. To keep things short, there were musicians stationed at these bases every now and then. Now, the musicians wanted to have live performances, but there wasn't enough of them among the troops to realistically do that. So they figured, why not pick up a bunch of the natives in droves, teach them how to play music, and pay them for the work? Unemployment was at an all-time high for obvious reasons. So a lot of the natives just took them up on the offer because it was the easiest way to get work, crazy enough. On top of all that, some of them leaned more towards playing bebop. For example, Toshiko Akiyoshi, a legend in the genre, would strictly only play bebop in the clubs. Bebop wasn't particularly popular in most clubs because we're talking about the 1940s here. You don't need a vocalist for bebop, which made it more comfortable to make music within this space for her and other Japanese natives. Now, as you can guess, that kind of music wasn't really that popular amongst certain crowds, but for others, they took it with open arms.
As a matter of fact, their respect for our craft, their respect for the music, is just so invigorating.
Now, it's hard to find raw numbers on how many people picked up music during that time and passed it on to their kids, but I can imagine from all the reading I did, it's as if half the people who played video games in the 90s played music instead. It was pretty common for a person to just take up music for work during that time, and those people who took up the music for work had kids. The average household in Japan during the 50s to 60s tend to have pianos and other instruments, mostly because there wasn't any broadcast channels post World War II till the 50s. So whereas most American homes at the time probably had a TV and a radio, most homes over there would have a radio and other things for entertainment. In Habino's case, they got him a piano as early as the age of 4. They also played jazz music often in the household, which further pushed the influence of music onto him. Others born around the 50s and 60s also had more or less a similar upbringing. From the 50s and onward, there were hundreds of clubs that would just play jazz music. And once the economic boom happened in the 60s and 70s, there were thousands of clubs playing jazz.
Boundaries were being pushed, new sounds being explored, and at the front of it all was fusion. Remember, Hibino himself describes his style as metal symphonic jazz. These sorts of styles and fusions of jazz is filled to the brim in video games, and that's mostly because the boom in video games started to line up with the rising popularity in fusion. So of course composers were going to bring over their style and influences into video games. Now I can't do this whole subject justice. There are countless videos and threads online that get into the meat of all this in better detail than I ever could, because I'm not a fucking musician, of course. However, I still felt that it was important to at least bring this to your attention, because if the biggest takeaway from this game is the music, then I believe I should do my due diligence to at least understand a bit of how and why these legends ended up making some of the most incredible tracks in the series for the most forgettable scam of a game. I think it's important to not only highlight these people and the history and the journey of it all, but to show people that some of these guys are still around, and if you truly love their work in these games, I think you should look into what they're up to now and support them in whatever way you can. And I want to help bring awareness to all of that. It's the least we can do for all the memories they gave us. Now sometimes I'll see someone say this Yu-Gi-Oh game was one of my favorite games. I get it when someone says that for something like False-Bound Kingdom, because even though that game is technically abysmal dog shit, the game's mechanics and content is so interesting that I can't help but acknowledge the amount of soul it has. A game like that and Duelist of the Rose that sticks with you for years, because truth be told, there's no other games like them. But when I see someone say something like World Championship 04 or 05 is their favorite,
Stinky! That shit is ass!
Several old Yu-Gi-Oh games to me are artistically, mechanically, and creatively bankrupt. However, there is one thing that even some of the bad ones excel at: the music. In my case, 2004's OST has been digging down my brain for years, to the point that I was looking forward to playing it again. Even in my wildest dreams, I did not expect that game to be so lifeless, because how could it be? The music was so godlike. I never finished it as a kid, and I always wondered why. How can you remember half the OST but not the game? The reality was, I probably got bored of the game after one duel or two and played something else. However, I know I booted this game up once a day just to hear the music that plays in Tier 2. And I think that might be the case for others out there. The ones who haven't touched the games in years and still think they were pretty decent because their fondest memories of the game was the music. And we have the composers to thank for those memories.